This is Mark Hutchinson, President and CEO of GE Greater China. GE is one of the biggest multinational conglomerate corporations in the world. In 2012, it ranked third on the list of Forbes Global 500 with revenue of $147.3 billion. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing more about GE. As I was doing the research, I was bombarded with web pages after web pages after web pages.
Yeah.
Well, a huge conglomerate. And I knew, of course, the energy sector, you guys are leading in that, but I had no idea so much with aviation,
Right.
finance, transportation, gas, healthcare, home and business appliances, so many different sectors of your business. What do you focus on in China?
We have three big businesses here. Aviation, which is really we make engines. Energy, which is really anything to do with the production of electricity. And then healthcare as well, which is more on devices. So those are our three major areas here.
GE started doing business in China as early as 1906 and was considered one of the most active foreign companies in the country at that time. 2 years later, the first GE lighting plant was built in Shenyang. Till now, all of GE's businesses have set up operations in China with more than 18,000 employees. Let's start with aviation then. China, of course, is growing at an unprecedented rate with building airports and adding more flight schedules. What is it like working in a system where most of the planes are state-owned?
We make the engines on the airplane. So if you have a look outside, the next time you fly, there's a high probability it's actually one of ours off the wing. So we provide about 3,000 engines now in China, so it's a big part of the Chinese fleet.
This is for current aircraft or for future?
This is for current aircraft.
Okay,
so this is the existing Chinese fleet. And the airlines, there's a lot of different airlines in China. They're no different than really airlines around the world. In fact, if anything, they're probably more efficient in the way they look at it. And they have their own personality to some extent.
How's that?
So they're different. So each one you deal with, you have to deal with differently. And that's the way we deal with all our customers around the world. So but they have their uniqueness, and they're very good at what they do here.
Do you mean in terms of machinery and fitting different planes?
No, just more an approach, I think, in the way they actually built their business and what they, the way they look at the various markets. Some look at them on a domestic basis, some look at a more national basis, and they tailor their fleet accordingly. So we have to deal with each customer differently, and that's the way they require.
We had a pavilion in the Olympics, the Beijing Olympics. This is a model,
Okay.
right? So and even the original is not this big either. So, but it gives you some kind of idea of how these engines are huge. You'll see one when we go over to the other lobby, actually.
And these engines are on planes in China now?
Yeah. So, and about 70% of all airplanes in China have our engines on. So
Wow.
big deal.
The engines are made in America?
They're mainly made in America, yeah. So the technology you had to be very centralized. It's very precision engineering. Some of the technology, like the blades on the new aeroplanes, are more composite materials, and we're starting to do that here in kind of different designs. So 3D printing, for example. It's you can now make these blades out of 3D printing, which is in carbon, which is humongous. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's extraordinary.
For the prototype or for the actual?
The actual thing, yeah. So you get this curve of the blade. Previously, you'd have to bend the metal. Right. Now you actually build it from basically a photocopy with basically shooting out carbon and then with a laser, and you build it up that way. Incredible, actually, technology, yeah.
As you work with the customers and you're looking at their fleets, tell me about the competition. I mean, GE, there must not be one major competitor, but I guess in each sector you must be competing against smaller companies or different industry companies.
Yeah.
What is the competitive scene like in aviation?
Yeah, well, it depends. It really does depend on the industry. Aviation is one where it's a global. You had to be a global competitor. So, our competition really is the Rolls-Royces,
Boeings.
Boeing. Boeing is more on the airframe. We make the engines. Okay, so it's Pratt and Whitney. So there's actually very few kind of global players, just because of the amount of money you have to invest to get into the industry. And that when you create an aircraft engine, it's a 30-year venture. So these things are on wing for a long time, and it's a huge investment up front. So we compete globally. We love competition because we find it makes us better. If you're competing, we find that you actually hone your skills better and you end up with much better products for your customers.
I understand from my research that for you to understand the market, you have traveled all around China. So let's shift from aviation and look into the healthcare sector. Where have you been to research healthcare?
Right. Well, healthcare is another important business we do here. We make, I hope you never have to go to hospital, but if you did, probably one of the devices you use, whether it's an ultrasound or CT scanner or MRI machine, is one of ours, actually. So that's what we do. We have about 26,000 devices already in China, so it's a big market. Wow. That market is kind of almost two-tiered in some ways. In China, the big hospitals, particularly in Beijing, Shanghai, they want all the best in the world, the best technology, the high-end technology. But there's another market, which is the developing market in China in what we call primary care. And that's all the other hospitals. So I actually spent some time when I first came here understanding that. I'd go out to cities and go to the local hospitals. And by doing that, you get a much better feel of actually what they need. And part of the investment we made here was actually putting what we call an innovation center in a place called Chengdu. And that's focused on primary care. So they're understanding what the local hospitals need, what's important to them. So you're not just bringing something from the United States or Europe and saying, well, sorry, that's what we
there,
have.
It's going to work here, yeah.
You really understand the nuances of the local market, and you try and bring things down to where it's more affordable, it's more accessible, and it's something that they can use.
For example?
A good example is we invested a few years ago in something called In China for China investments. So this is, in fact, I'm given a pool of money every year by my chairman to invest in local products.
Was this from 2010 to the present?
We've actually done
$2 billion US dollars?
Yeah, no, that was part of the investment we've made here. But I know it's an ongoing process, and it's partly investing in products which we need for the Chinese market. But actually, kind of interesting, we found that a lot of these products actually sell overseas. So actually, it's kind of morphed into more in China, but for the rest of the world.
Yes.
Now, let me give you one example. Okay. We have it's called a Brevo CT scanner. It was something which our team in Wuxi, we have our healthcare team based in Wuxi there, they worked with our experts around the world. And they designed a CT scanner which had a smaller kind of space. It was more adaptable to the local Chinese market. And also because of the costs we're able to take out of it, it was more price competitive. So those hospitals using it for the first time.
Like smaller hospitals and
smaller
towns?
As they kind of evolve into, getting more equipment. A lot of these hospitals in China, they're getting equipment for the first time. So, and we found it sold very well here, but actually probably more importantly, there was these markets overseas where it sold extremely well too. And it made us realize that investment in China is important because you've got a big market here, but you can make it scalable by going global. Right. So we don't do anything now where we don't invest in something which is scalable globally.
On May 30th, 2012, GE inaugurated the China Innovation Center in Chengdu, the company's first facility worldwide purposefully designed for customer innovation.
So why did we pick Chengdu? Well, this is part of our strategy to make sure we go west. The idea here is to really connect with the customers, to co-create with the customers, to really focus on what's important for China, particularly as it relates to China's 12th five-year plan.
GE has spent more than $80 million US to build, equip, and staff this brainstorming hub in Chengdu. And in July of the same year, GE opened another innovation center in China's ancient city of Xi'an. Is that why you chose places like Chengdu and Xi'an also to find a more localized approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think China, you can't just, if you just come to Shanghai, Beijing, you don't get a view of China. You've really got to get out into the West. And, we've increasingly pushed, our resources out West as well. I mean, don't get me wrong, Shanghai, Beijing will always be important.
And they will benefit from the innovation that's done in the second, third tier cities.
But actually being out in the West of China is important, understanding the customer needs there.
Tell me about the research center then, in Chengdu, also in Xi'an. Is it filled with a whole bunch of scientists who are, I have this image of them in laboratories doing little experiments, or who is there? Who's working there? What type of innovators?
Yeah. We have two innovation centers now, as you mentioned, Chengdu and Xi'an. The one in Chengdu is focused on primary care. There's about 600 or 700 people there. And it's a mix between application engineers, our salespeople, and customers, actually. So it's a place where customers can come and we can innovate together. So we have this idea of what we call co-creation. How do you create something? How do you think about your customer, how they make money? What do they need? And actually designing something which is going to help them, not what you think they need. And being close to those customers in Chengdu was so important, and it's proving highly successful.
Who are the customers? Who are the ones coming?
Doctors,
okay.
Physicians, locally.
So you think people who will work with the equipment at the end of the day.
They'll be the end users. So rather than trying to guess what they need, it's working with them and saying, well, okay, we need an ultrasound we can take out to the country. At the moment, if you had an ultrasound, you'd have to go to a hospital. So we worked with a lot of these physicians, and we came up with a handheld ultrasound. It was designed in China, but it had a lot of help from around the world, our experts in Norway and the United States. And it's basically like a mobile phone with a probe. It's very neat. So it means the doctor can take the equipment to the patient anywhere in China. And if you think about Western China, there's 500 million people out there, and that's an important part of the market. So that's been a great example of...
Right, not only affect the outer reaches of the smaller towns and cities, but as you said, abroad, this is able to use in other markets around the world.
That's right, and that particular product is actually sold in India, in Africa, in Russia, in Latin America. So, in fact, what it does, we didn't think about it at the time, it almost replaces the stethoscope, actually. So it's a
double
very
use, yes.
So it's a very neat application which is designed for the Chinese market here, but gone global. As I look at the healthcare industry, I think the next few years are going to be extremely exciting, and China's going to lead the world here, and we're happy to be part of this.
Let's talk about clean energy. You just mentioned that. Yeah. Can you explain clean energy in a very simple way? I know a lot of media and a lot of individuals, we don't really get it. We don't understand. We hear coal energy can be clean, or nuclear energy is the best.
Yeah.
Tell us. Help us understand this.
Yeah, it's a complex topic. We do a lot in the energy space. About 25% of the globe's electricity is made by our equipment. So we're big in the energy space. And our philosophy is we innovate technology in all the areas, different parts of energy, and let the customer decide. So we're big in wind, we're big in solar, we're big in gas, heavy-duty gas turbines. So we have a collection of different energy portfolio. When we talk about clean, it's kind of interesting. I came down from Beijing today. That's not clean. The air there is affected because so much of the generating capacity in China is coal. That's understandable. China's gone through this amazing growth over the last 20 years. It's fueled by coal, which is the cheapest way to make electricity, but it's also the dirtiest. And there's cheaper ways there's more efficient and cleaner ways to make electricity. One big area we believe is in gas, natural gas, a lot cleaner. You don't have the emissions out of natural gas. It's a lot cleaner to deal with. And the problem with China, it doesn't have enough natural gas. So over the last few years, it's been working on pipelines, building LNG terminals to bring gas into China. And gradually you'll see more power stations using natural gas. And that significantly changes the emissions. I look at China as being on a 20-year into a 50-year journey, right? So it's just got all very concentrated very quickly. So I totally believe China can overcome the environmental issues, and I think there's thinking about it the right way. But clean energy is key, really key.
Clean energy. And also the wind and the solar you mentioned earlier too. Is China leading the way in some areas for that, or where should we look for the countries leading the way? I
think it's important if you look at the national power generation portfolio, let's say, there's about 1,000 gigawatts of power. That's a lot. That's about the same as the United States actually in aggregate. The difference is China has to double that, which is, you think about it, double that in the next 10 years. Right. It's extraordinary. And one statistic I like actually visit. The United Kingdom, where I come from, has installed capacity of 70 gigawatts of power. Okay. China will put new capacity of 100 gigawatts every year, right? So it's doing a UK and a half every year in China. So, and it has to do that in a way as it thinks about its portfolio. So, you want to use renewables, but you couldn't possibly do 100 gigawatts of wind every year. Right. If you did 100 gigawatts of solar, you'd cover the whole country in solar panels. It's not possible. But you want to have a balance there, so you lead the way in renewables. You want to do as much as you possibly can in things like gas, which is cleaner. And then on your coal, I mean, coal is going to be a big part of the energy footprint here. You've got to figure out ways to do it cleaner. And there are cleaner ways.
Okay.
There is technology. We have technology which makes coal a lot cleaner.
Or is it just more expensive, the technology
It's
up
more
front?
expensive.
Yeah.
So the educational process here in China, I think, is looking at things over the longer term, not necessarily at saying, well, we need the cheapest. That's how we make decisions. You've really got to look at things over the life cycle. And so we have the technology which can help. And we're working with some great partners here to bring that into China.
GE was formed in 1892 by merger of two electric companies, Edison General and Thomson Houston. And the Edison behind the former company is none other than that of the great inventor, Thomas Edison. While most people know about his world-changing inventions, many people don't know he was also a successful entrepreneur. So with Edison as one of the company founders, GE carries on the tradition of imagination and innovation. I read that in a recent year, GE filed for 2,500 patents in just 1 year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's dozens a day. Are you still keeping up that capacity of innovation?
You mentioned a quote from Thomas Edison. He founded this company. His spirit lives with us. This is an infrastructure technology company. Everything we do is about innovation. And we do it globally. We believe that there should be open innovation globally. We feel that's the best way to innovate around the globe. And we try and innovate in everything we do. So it's a big part of what GE is about.
Well, I was reading your website, and I have to confess, when I read the websites of companies to prepare for these interviews, this is the first time I scoured your website and thought, I want to work there. What a great place to work. I mean, good work ethic, but also amazing words like innovation vertigo, eco-imagination, healthy imagination. I mean, are these parts of your company that encourage or perhaps even source innovation?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think innovation is everything we try to do is around how do we innovate, with our customers. A healthy imagination, for example, is about how do we make healthcare more accessible to more people around the world and more affordable, but keeping the quality up. So we have a big drive throughout our whole healthcare business globally to how do we actually make devices which are going to be more accessible, more affordable to a lot more people. So it's a big part of our investment in innovation.
It seems that there's two ways of looking at this innovation from your perspective. One is a short term, how can you use it now, but also a long term, like you said, the 30, the 50 years from now. How does that play into the innovation?
Well, it's an interesting equation because you have to get your balance right to investing in the now, right, to make sure that you can sell things now, but also making sure you set some investments, some people aside, and some really good brains so that you are taking the longer term view. And that's why when we look at R&D spend, we spend about 6% of our industrial revenue, equivalent $6 to $7 billion a year, just on R&D. It's a huge amount of money. As the great inventor Thomas Edison, as one of GE's founders, innovation is one of the most important values for GE even to this day. And a new concept of reverse innovation also interests me. There's an interesting concept with GE called reverse innovation. Explain that. Yeah. Reverse innovation is something we learned to do. And I think if you kind of look back 10, 20 years, an American company, European company would make a product and then send it out to the rest of the world, and you kind of had to take it, right? Yeah. And if you're competing if your competitors are doing the same thing, that's all well and good. But the reality is different. You have these economies. The market may be different? Or market's different, and then competition is different, right? So your competition today is going to be different than what it is in 10 years' time. Or 20 years ago. Or 20 years ago, right? So we felt it's important as we innovated in country. That's really what it's all about. So reverse innovation for us was, we started to, this goes back probably 7 or 8 years, we made a huge investment over the last 7 or 8 years in this. It's really understanding what the country needs and then putting our teams to work. We have 3,000 engineers here in China. Most of those people are focused on designing products, in China for China.
Help me understand this some more. What type of products? You mean like refrigerators or?
We tend to focus on the three major areas of our business here. So I'd say aviation, energy, all different aspects of energy, and healthcare.
Okay.
Okay. Healthcare is probably the easiest example because it's taking products, which, global products, and an MRI. How do you strip that down, scale it down? How do you take something, how do you make it for the Chinese market, right? So
it's taking innovation from the past, looking at it again, and applying it to the local.
Part of it's that. Probably a bigger part, though, is saying, okay, starting from scratch, right? So, we have...
Is there a better way to do it?
Is there a better way to do it? Is there a better way of doing it? Is there, you have in China, they have, all the X-ray machines are analog, right? Now, you could say, okay, I'm going to design a digital X-ray machine, which is probably the traditional way it would approach. You would have gone in, you'd have developed it globally, it would eventually kind of got to China.
I see where this is going, though. If you suddenly give this to the Chinese market, some of the hospitals won't be ready for that.
That's right, so they can't afford it. So we found, what if we work with the Chinese hospitals, understand what they need?
Their process.
Yeah. And we found there is other ways to make an analog machine digital, which is going to be a lot cheaper. It's quick, we can go to market now. Now, the interesting thing is that as we do these applications, we find that they're scalable everywhere else around the world. So actually, reverse innovation is you do the innovation in a different part of the world.
Localize the product.
Localize the product.
Then reintroduce it.
Scale it globally. And eventually, it feeds back into your home markets.
On January 18, 2013, GE unveiled the results of its third annual Global Innovation Barometer, which indicates that China is perceived as the third most innovative country, surpassing Japan for the first time.
What has changed in China in the last 12 months?
Well, I think it's kind of interesting what's happening in China. Innovation is now becoming much better understood, and I think particularly in China where people understand how important it is for China's future. In my mind, innovation is the key that makes China a high-income society rather than just being caught in the middle-income trap. And so having people thinking about, well, how do we innovate? What do we innovate? What's the new things that China's going to lead the world in? And I think as we take these pulses, that's coming through loud and clear. It's how important innovation is to China's long-term growth.
China has said they're looking for someone like a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates to lead this innovation, but from what I'm hearing you say, it sounds like you think maybe innovation is more collective. It might come from a large group rather than from an individual. What do you think?
We believe in open plan innovation, and we think it has to be global, right? So a country doing innovation by themselves is going to be limited by their geographic. Company or someone who can innovate globally is going to tap into the best talent around the world. So we think that the boundary should be open. And China's starting to think that way. So something else the survey showed was that Chinese companies are much more open now to partnering on a global basis to innovate. And that's wonderful news, because that's where a company like GE can really play a part in being part of that innovation for process. So and it should be more collaborative.
Well, Mark, I read somewhere that GE's $5.8 billion operational revenue from China is partly due to your keen understanding of China. What is this keen understanding of China? The CEOs watching want to know.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been around China for 20 years, so I think that's important because I've seen what it was like before, and I've seen what it's achieved over the last 20 years particularly. So, and I think having that lens to me on China is very important.
Talk specifically what you've seen in these 20 years. In what ways?
Well, you look around you here, and I always say this to my colleagues around the world: is you don't read the China in the press, right? You see in the United States. You've got to be here, and it's extraordinary what's happened here. The pace of change compared to 20 years ago. But as I said earlier, it's on a journey. This is a 50-year journey, and we have to realize that there's going to be bumps in the road along the way. And they asked me to do this job. I jumped at the chance because I thought, here's an opportunity to work in China. I couldn't ask to be in a better place for growth. In a company like GE, it's all about growth. So here I am in the country which is going to grow more than anywhere else in the world, that is going to be on a global scale more important than anywhere in the world, and needs the kind of things that we do. And so that's why I've jumped at the chance of coming back. And it takes some time.
Yeah, easier said than done.
Yeah.
What do you mean in terms of infrastructure, in terms of growth of business, the ease of doing things quickly or slowly sometimes? Or what do you mean in terms of these 20 years of watching how things have happened?
Yeah. It's understanding how decisions are made. I think it's understanding your customers, and it's understanding what China needs. So I spend a lot of time with my team about really kind of drilling in our purpose. I think as an individual, it's important to have a purpose in life. As a company, it's important to have a purpose. So we believe our purpose here in China is to help China solve some of its toughest problems, to help improve the quality of life for the people here, and to develop talent here in China. And those three pillars of really what we base everything on here. So myself as a CEO, I think understanding why those are important to China and explaining to our team why we have to harness the assets of GE to help China and how we can do that. I think that's really important to see. I see that as a big part of my job.
Tell me about the corporate environment of GE. What is unique about it that makes the employees want to get out of bed and go to work and stay happily employed for decades?
I'm a veteran. I've 20 years in GE, and there's other people who've been in the company a lot longer. People stay here because of the culture. The GE culture is unique, and that's what holds us together. It's a family.
In what ways is it? I mean, we hear about Apple and IBM, one of the first companies where you could wear jeans to work, strange things like that. What are some things we would see if we walk down the aisle of GE office?
Well, I think if you come to our innovation center, which is close to here actually, which you're very cordially invited to. We'd love to have you there. You'd see that it's all about technology there. So we're a technology company. We're a leader in technology, and that's what you see. So you walk around our research center here. It's a bit like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. There's lots of things happening.
Wow, great.
So fundamentally we're a technology company, but it's the core behind that which is important. So we're a meritocracy. Doesn't matter where you're from, male, female, it has everything to do with your ability. And so I think that's important. That's why people like working for GE. We have 300,000 associates around the world. The fact is the meritocracy is important. Integrity. You mentioned Thomas Edison. No, we've been around for 130 years. We want to be around for the next 100, 200, 300 years, right? So integrity is absolutely the bedrock of what we do. And preserving the past and the future is such an important part of our culture. Personally, I work for GE because I like the ethics. The ethics sit well with me.
Many of our audience members are fresh graduates out of college. Many are Chinese. They speak English very well. They're looking for jobs in multinational companies. How would you advise them?
For people coming out of the university, I would tell them, look, think big and try and be the best at everything you do. That's the best way to get ahead. And just keep trying.
These students are already doing that. If they've gotten into university, their test scores are high, they're already at the top of their group, so to speak.